Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zooming out from your everyday choices to uncover the actual structural blueprint that builds global economies. Have you ever wondered why your morning cup of coffee costs exactly what it does? Why certain goods are produced in the first place, how they're made, and who actually gets them? Well, today, we're going to unpack the hidden architecture of economic choice. Here is the blueprint we'll be following today. We're going to hit the engine of scarcity, the true cost of choosing, the three core economic questions, the spectrum of economic control, and finally, we'll wrap up with a real-world look at India's evolving economic blueprint. We really want to see how individual scarcity eventually scales up into massive national systems. All right, part one, the engine of scarcity, from individual needs to global limits. We're starting at the absolute bedrock foundation of all economics here. Before we even think about nations or governments, ask yourself a very personal question. How do you actually evaluate and spend your own most scarce resource? I mean, your time. We've all been there, right? You finally get a free evening. If you choose to spend an hour binge-watching a show, that's an hour you didn't spend reading or working or finally fixing that leaky faucet. That fundamental tension, wanting to do a million things but only having 24 hours in a day, that is the exact seed of our entire global economy.
A lot of people hear the word economics and immediately think of stock markets or interest rates. But honestly, it's just the study of human choices in a world completely defined by limits. In fact, if you look at the ancient Greek root of the word, oikonomia, it literally translates to household management. It's all about optimizing what little we have to maximize our well-being. Whether you're trying to balance a tight family budget at your kitchen table, or you're a government official funding a massive infrastructure project, the core logic is exactly the same.
And that brings us to the fundamental mismatch every single society faces. Think about it. Human desires are basically infinite. You start out wanting a simple bicycle to get to work. Then, naturally, you want a motorbike. Then a car. But on the flip side of that equation, the physical stuff, the land, water, coal, and capital needed to actually build those things, that stuff is strictly finite. You can't just wish it into existence. This massive collision between unlimited wants and limited resources, that creates scarcity. It is the inescapable reality forcing everyone, from a local farmer to a tech billionaire, into a constant, endless loop of decision-making.
Because resources are incredibly scarce, the very first step in managing an economy is learning how to categorize and prioritize. To even function, we have to separate our basic survival needs, the absolute essentials like food, clean water, and shelter, from our wants. The wants are the continuous upgrades, the newest smartphone, a luxury watch, a summer flight to Europe. Managing the psychology of consumer choice, knowing exactly when a society needs to prioritize bread over plane tickets, is absolutely crucial to making an economy actually work.
Moving right along to Section 2, the true cost of choosing, where we uncover that every choice has a hidden price. And honestly, this is where things get really fascinating, because in a world of limits, making a choice always demands a tangible sacrifice. Since resources have alternative uses, allocating them means making a painful sacrifice somewhere else. Let's say a nation is sitting on a limited stockpile of steel. You could mold that steel into life-saving medical monitors, stamp it into household refrigerators, or forge it into commercial aircraft. But here's the catch. If a government allocates its scarce steel to roll out 1 million new refrigerators for consumers, the literal opportunity cost is the medical equipment that will never reach a hospital, or the planes that will never fly. You simply cannot have all three at maximum capacity. No way. Economists actually model this exact sacrifice using what's called a production possibility curve, or PPC. Imagine a perfectly efficient world with zero waste. If a farmer looks at his land and decides, okay, I want to increase my barley production by 25 kilograms, the math dictates he must sacrifice exactly 10 kilograms of his wheat yield to make room for it. That 10 kilos of lost wheat, that is the direct, undeniable opportunity cost. Any step toward more of one good demands a quantifiable sacrifice of another. It's just a mathematical reality governing national policy as much as that farmer's field. All right, Section 3, three core economic questions. The gears of the economic machine. This relentless engine of scarcity forces every single society to constantly answer three interlocking questions. These are the three gears turning the whole machine: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And answering just one automatically forces your hand on the others. You literally cannot change what you produce. Let's say switching a factory from making cheap canvas school shoes to premium handcrafted leather boots, without completely overhauling how you manufacture them. And obviously, you change for whom you're producing, because those luxury boots require a buyer with a lot more cash. It's all completely connected.
Let's zoom in on that how gear for a second. Decisions about land, labor, and capital, they aren't random. Producers run through a strict logic tree. Imagine you're advising a business owner. First, you ask, is machinery cheap and accessible? If the answer is no, but human labor is abundant, you guide them toward labor-intensive methods, like traditional farming or handcrafted goods. But if capital is cheap and you need mass production, you pivot. You fill factories with robotics to churn out automobiles. Nailing that exact right mix is basically the difference between thriving and going bankrupt in a scarce world.
Which brings us to Section 4, the spectrum of economic control. Who holds the power of choice? Zooming out from individual producers, we need to look at the overarching system that dictates how an entire country answers those three core questions we just talked about. When you look across the globe, you see stark systemic differences, and the defining variable is always the balance of power. On one extreme, you have a planned economy, strict centralized government control. The state owns the land and factories, bureaucrats set the prices, and workers are mostly motivated by just complying with central targets, which usually leads to pretty low innovation. But on the absolute other extreme, a market economy. Everyday individuals and private businesses own the resources. The government just plays referee, handling safety and the law, while fierce, decentralized competition drives rapid innovation and quality. But, pure systems rarely exist in the real world. Almost all modern global economies operate in this messy, pragmatic middle ground, the mixed economy ecosystem. This is where a society tries to balance the fierce, competitive innovation of the private market with the government providing public goods, the stuff the market won't naturally fund, like expansive highways, public parks, and vital welfare programs. It is a constant, delicate balancing act to find that sweet spot where private ownership drives quality, while the state still ensures fair play and protects the vulnerable.
Let's look at Section 5, India's evolving economic blueprint, charting a nation's systemic pivot. To really see this grand architecture in action, let's look at how one specific nation has actually adapted its structural blueprint over time.
Because an economic architecture is a living thing, right? It doesn't stay static. And India's history is a phenomenal example of this. Post-independence, India went with a very heavy state-led approach. The public sector totally dominated banking and heavy industry, creating this labyrinth of strict licenses for almost any private production. But fast forward to 1991, severe economic difficulties and a massive balance of payments crisis literally backed the nation into a corner, forcing a historic pivot. They aggressively dismantled those regulations, transforming the country into the highly dynamic mixed economy we see today, unlocking market-oriented growth and empowering private enterprise, while keeping vital state welfare programs intact. So how exactly does a government successfully steer a massive, evolving mixed economy of over 1 billion people without driving off a cliff? Well, you replace sheer guesswork with hardcore data architecture. Economists act as the nation's navigators, relying on exhaustive structural analysis, mapped out in documents like the Annual Economic Survey of India. By rigorously reviewing past performance across agriculture, industry, and services, policymakers can surgically guide taxation and direct welfare exactly where it's needed most. You simply cannot manage what you don't measure. Which brings us right back to square one. Ultimately, whether we are talking about allocating a weekly family budget at the kitchen table or driving private innovation and building public goods across an entire nation, everything we build upward rests on one totally immovable foundation: finite resources and scarcity. And that is the profound reality of economics. It isn't just abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. It's the literal structure of human survival and progress. So, as you walk out into the world today, as you look at the goods lining the shelves in your stores, the jobs available in your city, and the laws passed by your government, ask yourself, how is this invisible architecture of scarcity quietly dictating the choices you make every single day? Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep questioning the architecture around you.